I am, and it's my great pleasure to introduce my wolf pack, our wolf pack, Karen, Renee, and Mel. Ready for the big reveal, girls?
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Okay, so
I just lost my video for some reason.
no, a presentation is not complete without the t-shirt, so we feel like we're in costume.
That's perfect.
All right, Karen, Renee, or Mel, I can't remember who's controlling the PowerPoint.
I'm sorry, I've just lost my video, so apologies for that.
No problem, Ren. Karen, are you in the driver's seat?
I am.
Thank you. So we would like to begin our presentation by acknowledging country and pay our respects to Turrbal and Yagara, traditional owners of the lands upon which we're meeting here in Brisbane. Turrbal and Yagara country is underneath the bricks and stone and mortar that is the University of Queensland, and we would pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge that we are living, working and loving on Yagara and Turrbal country that was never ceded as white settler colonial women. Dearest Virginia, let us go straight to the heart of the matter and trust that you will be excited by what we're about to share with you. In a short essay titled, Why?, you daringly question the ways in which knowledge is produced, performed and proclaimed as particular kinds of truths in institutions of power and authority, including academic writing. You subversively suggested that the little sign that comes at the end of the question has a way of making the rich writhe, and advised that such questions choose their asking place with care. You see, we like your writing very, very much. In fact, once we began reading works like A Room of One's Own, 3 Guineas, Professions for Women, The Moment, and How Should One Read a Book, we have been unable to think of little else. And because, like you, Virginia, we are astonished as we draw the veil off things with words and how more and more bubbles in our minds give new meaning to that twisted little sign to trouble what the product and performance of critical autoethnographic work, words and worlds might come to be. In this performative session, we share the ways in which you, Virginia, inspire us, and we have decided that we're going to play about with all of our favourites. Those words of yours we adore, and the ones that embolden us over and over again to write critical autoethnography as women in the academy. Yet, we have to confess, there is one sentiment in particular that refuses to settle, feverishly scratching and screwing fear into our brains, and it relates to the genius and integrity required in the midst of the purely patriarchal, and we might add neoliberal, colonial, white supremacist, imperialist, the list goes on, academy in which we find ourselves. You see, we are afraid of refusing to obey those voices which dictate to us how we should present this work, perpetual, domineering, grumbling, patronising, aggrieved, angry, but rarely kind voices. Write this, they say, write that, they say, and they will never let us alone. But no, it is time to no longer be afraid, and we refuse the frowns and gowns that send us into failure even before we have begun. Come do your worst that feel, lock up your libraries if you like, shout all manner of warnings and advice, and put as many fences as you can in our way. We have the staying power. We will make the attempt, and we shall not hesitate or fumble. We shall fly over each and every one of them like a bird, and we shall write critical autoethnography. Your Elizabeth, in sisterhood with Karen, Mel and Renee, blissfully walking with bare feet on the forbidden grass.
When our paper was accepted, we decided we might tell you something about our professional experiences and how they have been impacted by Virginia Woolf. It is true, I, Karen Madden, am a PhD candidate. It is true, I'm employed as a leader in a girls' school. But what experiences have I had with Woolf that impacts upon my leadership work? It is difficult to say. My profession is education, and in that profession, there are perhaps more experiences for women to lead than in any other, particularly in a girls' school, where my job, my PhD, and a good part of my life are situated. For the road was cut many years ago by the Sisters of the Sacred Advent, the Sisters of St. Joseph, Mercy Sisters, many women in religious orders, and many more women otherwise, also unknown and forgotten. except perhaps with a building named for them here or a house bearing their name there, have been before me, making the path smooth and regulating my steps. Thus, when I came to lead in a girls' school, there were very few material obstacles in my way. Leading was a natural and expected progression. The school peace was not broken by the appointment of a woman. No demand was made to make room for the men. The focus on girls and women is, of course, the reason why women have succeeded as leaders in girls' schools before they have succeeded in other professions. So what possible need for Wolf would there be in such a place?
Hello, my name is Mel Green. I'm also a teacher and a PhD candidate. I'm also inviting Virginia Woolf to make sense of a critical school issue, one which may be considered as multitudinal chaos. My doctoral thesis asks, how should teachers engage students in reading for enjoyment? In the first place, I want to emphasize the note of interrogation at the end of my title. This is a question that has lasted the lifetime of my teaching career and kept me awake on many a night. Over the past 25 years, I have encouraged and advised many hundreds of children and teachers with ideas and suggestions for reading, whilst also sustaining the spirit of freedom in their book choices. For my inquiring students, I have trained them exactly and powerfully to find the very spot on the shelves of the school or classroom library, to locate that one special book in the multitude of beckoning titles that will provide the deepest and widest and fullest possible enjoyment in reading. From the enchantment of the magic chair and magic carpet, we have for brief time spells lived in different worlds and been spun around by character revelations. We have imaginatively perceived 1,000 conflicting impressions and lost all grasp upon emotion itself, and still made it on time for school assembly. Each reading experience has left in its wrenching and uprooting a residue in relations towards nature and destiny, but also, importantly, a vital sense of aesthetic curiosity well satisfied. What if all this important work were to cease?
Now, I ask you to take a moment to consider what composes the present moment. In this present moment, I will introduce myself. I'm Renee Mickelburgh, a PhD candidate at the University of Queensland School of Communication and Arts. In a past moment, I was a journalist and a communications specialist, and so perhaps in this moment, I still am. In this present moment, the past lies upon the present. In this present moment, I will also explain myself. My PhD explores what happens when Australian women's stories of private home gardens are transplanted into the public online space. What happens when the physical garden moment, that moment when the sun is on your face and your hands are full of soil, runs like quicksilver on a sloping board into the digital realm? To help consider my personal and PhD moment, which is full of other moments, Virginia Woolf and I invite you to sit in our bubble, a picnic table in my garden. In this digital moment, you may be in a moment where the night is falling so that the table in the garden among the trees grows whiter and whiter and the people around it more indistinct. Where I speak to you from, in this same moment, the light has emerged and the day fully welcomed. I'm speaking from the moment of a crisp, warm spring morning, almost summer because the thunderstorms have already started rolling in from the west. I sense we are not too far from a summer's night, that seasonal moment of warm air, mosquitoes and cool drinks with condensation dripping slowly down the side of a clear glass, making it tremble and quiver. In your present moment, you may be enjoying something similar or perhaps something quite different. But despite being separate, we are also somehow together. And in this moment, we can consider what composes this moment and feel firsthand how the technology we communicate through blurs boundaries and borders to consider the same but very different moment together. These moments are, and this moment is, composed of visual and sense impressions.
Associate Professor Mackinlay was sitting, writing, at a table in an alfresco cafe. She looked up, startled, as the shadow of a man passed by. No, it was not a beetle, it was only the waiter. She laughed. Then, as the attendant placed her beverage in front of her with a smile, the words of her own poem came into her mind. A girl in a blue and white check dress quietly sipped her sweet, thick coffee. It was her usual start to the day, but she was not in a usual place. The noise of one motorbike for every two people filled the air. All manner of horns sounded to signal a change in movement for her to be free. She sighed, for soon her solitude would be gone. The thought of having to fall in line behind the academic procession of men that pervaded her world completely and utterly bored her. Blah, 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 said Professor Von X as his band of monstrous men went on and on. She had written that poem one day 11 years ago while attending an academic conference when she was very unhappy. Now she was happy. She was growing old, yet thinking back through and with her mothers as a woman was keeping her reading and writing feminist academic soul, sound and sentiment alive. She bent down over the words she had written in her journal for a moment. Her words with their wide-mouthed W's, great eyes and heavy curled Y's still resembled her. She was a woman. This was her world. That was all. The alfresco table, strangely enough, stood perfectly still.
But to tell you my story, it is not as simple as one might expect for a woman leading in a girls' school. You have only got to figure yourselves in a school with girls and young women to educate. She only had to become indispensable to her bosses, studying diligently, showing her dedication by taking on extra projects, and conscientiously speaking positively about the school at every moment. Then it occurred to her to do what is simple and expected at a certain point after all, to attend some conferences for aspiring leaders, put in an application or two and practice her interview technique. It was thus that I became a leader, and my effort was rewarded with a position on the senior leadership team. A very glorious day it was for me, a chance to do something, really do something, to address the unequal opportunities available to girls and young women. But to show you how little I deserved to be called a feminist in my professional life, how little I knew of the struggles and difficulties of such ambitions, I have to admit that instead of speaking about the ways our approach to educating girls perpetuates the status quo, I went out and performed Ms. Madden, leader in a girls' school, with professionally suited, broad-smiled, enthusiastic excellence, carefully avoiding any conflict, whatever. I soon discovered that if I were going to review my leadership through a feminist lens, I should need to do battle with a certain phantom. And the phantom was a woman. And when I came to know her better, I called her good girl leader. It was she who used to come between me and my feminism when I was at work. It was she who bothered me and wasted my time and tormented me so that at last I killed her. You who've come from a younger and happier generation may not have heard of her. You may not know what I mean by the good girl. I will describe her as shortly as I can. She was intensely sympathetic. She was immensely charming. She was utterly unselfish. She excelled in the difficult arts of school life. She sacrificed herself daily for her students. If there was a school function, she was at it. If there was a project that needed doing, she did it. In short, she was so constituted that she never had a mind or wish of her own, but preferred to sympathise always with the mind and the wishes of the principal. The principal's wishes were her greatest privilege. She was so grateful to have been given the chance to lead. And when I came to write about feminist leadership, I encountered her with the very first words. Feminism is the fight against imperialist, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy, Bell Hooks said. Oh dear, Good Girl Leader replied. I needed to kill her. I turned upon her and caught her by the throat. I did my best to kill her. My excuse, if I were held up in a court of law, would be that I acted in self-defense. Had I not killed her, she would have killed me. She would have plucked the feminist heart right out of my leadership work.
But, you may ask, who might you invite to a dinner party if you could invite any two people, dead or alive? Here I bring together the philosophical genius and wit of pioneering reader-writer Virginia Woolf and contemporary of hers, American educational reformer John Dewey. The setting is the bistro at the State Library of Queensland, Brisbane. The year is 2021. The pressing matter in this momentous meeting of magnificent minds is the current state of student engagement in reading for enjoyment. The pandemic problem of readercide has surreptitiously crossed international borders. Its neoliberal transmission increasingly continues to catastrophically threaten children's lives on a global scale. The dinner guests have agreed to unite in solidarity in this, a reading for enjoyment movement, on one pernickety proviso. Prunes are off the menu. I said, Virginia, John, thank you both for joining me here to discuss this very pressing matter of readercide. What do you make of this? Virginia said, what an acrid vision. Is literature to be forgotten, to vanish on the rubbish heap? John said, are you to drive away aesthetic experiences that are the very necessary and vital experiences, ingredients of happiness? And Virginia asked, is there not an open window from which light can be thrown on literature, on books, on reading? And John asked, is reading to become a process that is essentially mechanical? So I said, yes, John. Some may call it the science of reading. Others may call it mind-numbing drills. You both asked the same questions that prompted my doctoral study. How do we advocate reading for enjoyment? Virginia said, well, I feel at liberty here to put forward a few ideas and suggestions, because you must not allow anyone to fetter that enjoyment, which is the most important quality that a reader can experience. If nothing else, to refresh and exercise children's own creative powers. And John said, indeed, it is safe to say that creative conceptions come only to persons who are relaxed in their reading, to the point of reverie and enjoyment. Virginia said, to really feel the intoxication of rhythm, of words sensitively written. And John said, yes, in reading literature, there is a rhythm of surrender and reflection. And Virginia said, oh, to feel the splendor of words. And John said, yes, the visual forms of letters and words are stimuli to which we respond with emotional, imaginative, and intellectual values. Virginia said, promoting higher standards of aesthetic sensibilities, all by contact with the books themselves. And John said, it seems to me the school would fail to accomplish its full office if it does not fully indicate to pupils what to look for and what to find in books as aesthetic objects. Virginia said, opportunity is squandered when books pass in review like the procession of animals in a shooting gallery, and the teacher has only 1 second in which to load, aim, and shoot. And John said, They must judge literary texts in terms of preconceptions as to what the author meant by such and such word, what the author meant by such and such phrase, by which there is no inherent aesthetic value. And Virginia said, when good teachers may ask from books what books can give us. And John said, when books are open in the hands of pupils and with the teacher's encouragement, they discuss the beauty, getting out of it all the joy possible. This stimulates a real love of books. And Virginia said, oh yes, the desire grows upon us. The nerve of sensation that sends shocks through us is our chief illuminant. We learn through feeling. And John said, we do, Virginia, we do. Through the responsive energies of feeling, barriers are dissolved, limited prejudices melt away. This insensible melting is by far more efficacious than the change effected by reasoning, because it enters directly through the senses into attitude. And I said, you have both enlightened the many aspects of enjoyment that reading brings as an evocative, embodied experience.
Now, let us move back into our garden moment. As we wander through this garden, online and off, I will try to convince you, as Virginia Woolf did in the moment, that we are spectators and also passive participants in a pageant. As we sit in this blissful moment, we might get the sense of what this moment is composed of. What shape does it take? In this physical and sensual moment, this moment, like Virginia Woolf's moment, is composed of a sense that the legs of the chair we sit on are sinking through the centre of the earth. Passing through the rich garden earth, they sink weighted down. Perhaps you might imagine, as I do, that wherever you are in this garden, your feet are bare on the forbidden grass. But in 2021, this garden moment is also a digital moment. Entry into my garden moment should have been quite a simple process. Put hands on the gate, unclasp the latch, and winch as the rusty hinges squeak their discomfort. The gardens I arrived at, though, required a different entry. The simple click of a button did not allow me to feel the heat of the day like it did in Virginia's moment, where the surface of the body opened as if all the pores were open and everything lay exposed, or feeling the air waft cold on the skin under one's clothes. Technology opened the gate for me, provided my welcome, and allowed me to become both the spectator and the passive participant. I may not have felt the soil and rough grass beneath my feet, but soon my eyes and ears became as familiar with these gardens as my own. Virginia Woolf wanted a room of her own to write. The women I study have, like me, a garden of their own to write and speak and picture. In past moments, women's gardens have long sat in the private place, once considered unfit for public consumption. But I found my way into these small private gardens, places nestled amongst the home. For me, they were very much the public space. My wandering led me to 3 garden plots, a garden to listen to, a garden to look at, and a garden to read. Digital podcasts tell garden stories of care and compassion and made me consider whether or not they contain within them a historical legacy of more unpaid work for women. I watched the growth and sudden decline of a much-loved neighbourhood verge garden and considered the precarity of what it means to reclaim the commons. I've studied the words of a garden writer in a series of personal online essays about her journey to a new life and garden in an isolated river cottage, and thought about blurred boundaries, dreams and desires. As I read, listened and watched these contemporary Australian women's stories, I wondered, what did they mean when they spoke and wrote and pictured their lives in and around their gardens? What was the shape of their moment, both online and off? What was their moment of being? I was searching for what Virginia Woolf describes as the wider circumference of the moment. Online garden stories are a shared habitat. Private garden her stories are now part of the public technoculture, that intangible place where culture and technology collide. The circumference of these moments stretch wider than we realise. They are moments shared by the human and non-human, the technical and natural, the past and present, strangers and friends. They are words and visual sense impressions. there is a sense that they all exist in the same bubble. The circumference of this moment is wider than the space of the garden. At times, it has felt like trespass. In my search for what is communicated from common ground, I've wandered into private property, and I've wondered whether, as the sign says, will trespassers be prosecuted?
Dearest Virginia, why, I hear you ask, am I contemplating writing feminist autoethnography with you? The explanation is quite simple, you see, because I read A Room of One's Own with an ethnographic eye, and I felt the sensibilities of autoethnographic writing shimmering beneath the surface of your words immediately. Fiction, you wrote on page 2, is likely to contain more truth than fact. And once you had dropped this line of thought into the stream of my own about Virginia Woolf and feminist autoethnography, it kept tugging and teasing at the back of my mind. And this is something I must take up with you as a matter of urgency, this matter of the F word, for it has been spinning and pressing with the great force of a screw on my brain. I'm trying to position your work as feminist words, writing we might hold close to our own as autoethnographers, to light the feminist lamp in our spine and let it blaze, let it blaze. For isn't that the revolutionary call you sounded to us in 3 Guineas? Setting the Academy alight with feminist thinking and wondering seems just as pressing now as it was then, for it would quite likely to distress you to know that patriarchy, Virginia, but let me borrow from you and call him Professor Von X, is still up to his same old tricks with his procession of educated men following dutifully behind in this 21st century version of Oxbridge I find myself in. Why, it was only last week I saw what I can now only read as the most comical display of the boys' club. It was during our research committee meeting, a bastion of masculinist superiority, and the characters in this particular performance were Professor Von X, Doctors A, B, and C, and Professor W for woman. The committee was discussing nothing of extreme importance, but Professor Von X spread his legs wide and assumed the mantle. As the only professor here, Dr. A began and directed his words to Professor Von X, who nodded in smug affirmation for his understudy to continue. Professor W stared resolutely ahead. Perhaps you would be kind enough to grace us with your intellectual presence, Professor Von X, and present the inaugural theory lecture this year. It was more of a statement of fact than a question. I watched incredulously as Doctors B and C started bobbing their heads up and down like young parrots waiting for their parents to feed them, and I wondered for a moment if they were at risk of developing severe ataxia. I looked around the meeting table and saw my academic sisters staring at the strange behaviour of the male creatures. Whoops, a slip of the tongue. I did not mean to write colleagues. They too were stunned and yet not surprised by the scene of psychophantasm unfolding before them. Dr. A continued excitedly by waving his long arms in the air as if desperately trying to catch his seminal plans for the school's seminar series. Then we could ask John, and after that we could check to see if Paul is in town, perhaps Judas. Professor W remained still, but one by one she caught the eye of her female friends, and a bubble of recognition floated in the air. With every inch of our bodies, brains and souls, we knew what was happening between Professor Von X and his band of merry men, and we willfully refused to take part in it. Our newly formed Society of Women made a secret vow to watch, wait and walk in solidarity. We were prepared to be patient, for we knew then and now that our time is coming to throw armfuls of dead leaves on our feminist bonfire, and we will leap over the flames with delight. Forever your firebug, Elizabeth.
But to continue my story, the good girl leader was dead, then what remained? You may say that what remained was a simple and common object, a feminist woman in a girls' school with a leadership position. In other words, now that she'd rid herself of that falsehood, that woman only had to be herself. But what is herself? I mean, what is a feminist leader? How does one lead a girls' school in a feminist way? I assure you, I do not know. I do not believe that anyone can know until she has lived a feminist life and lived that life in all aspects of her life, including her work. I turn to the theoretical work of Sarah Ahmed. And to understand, you must try first to imagine the state of mind of a senior leader in a girls' school. I hope I'm not giving away professional secrets if I say that a senior leader's chief desire is to be as uncontroversial as possible. She has to induce in herself a state of perpetual congeniality. She wants school life to proceed with the utmost quiet and regularity. She wants to be liked by her students, useful to her staff, and respected by the parents. To update essentially the same policies, make small improvements to the same systems, day after day, month after month, while she is leading, so that nothing may break the illusion in which she is living. That the best thing she can do is avoid anything that will disturb or disquiet the fine tradition and culture of the school. Be that as it may, I want you to imagine me beginning my research of leadership in a girls' school and discovering Sarah Ahmed's The Promise of Happiness, Willful Subjects, and Living a Feminist Life. I want you to figure to yourselves a woman sitting in an office in which for hours, indeed days, months, and years, she read of the cost to girls and women when we promote happiness mythologies, of how current education practices are underscored by philosophies of willfulness that serve to oppress rather than liberate its subjects, of the brick wall feminists come up against when they challenge the status quo in educational institutions. If you imagine her sitting there trying to grapple with what she did each day and her ambition to live an authentically feminist life, you will no doubt begin to see why Woolf's questions started to become my questions too.
I said, Virginia, John, I do appreciate your insights here, I really do. You both share so much in common when it comes to the art of reading. Virginia said, and literature is a very complex art. To read a book as it should be read calls for the rarest qualities of imagination, insight, and judgment. And John said, this fact constitutes the peculiarity of all experience that is definitely aesthetic. Its imaginative quality dominates. Virginia said, you must be capable of great boldness of imagination if you are going to make use of all that the novelist, the great artist, gives you. And John said, it must fall back upon imagination, upon the embodiment of ideas in an emotionally charged sense. Virginia said, you must be capable of great fineness of perception. And John said, yes, Virginia, the promise of that delightful perception, which is aesthetic experience. Virginia said, readers must follow their own instincts. And John said, and only then readers may become interested in whether Shakespeare meant to represent Hamlet as mad. So I asked, I believe you both enjoyed Hamlet. And Virginia said, better than Lear, John. And John said, not if you've seen Edwin Booth's portrayal, the greatest performance of the 19th century. And I asked, what about Diderot? Such a prolific writer, a bit like Andy Griffith. And John said, Diderot virtually announced a historic revolution when he said there was a need for bourgeois tragedies. And Virginia said, I would swim the Channel to meet Voltaire and Diderot and Madame du Deffand. Then I said, I would swim all the oceans to meet Alexander McCall Smith. I love him. And I think we all love Keats. And Virginia said, oh, the emotion which Keats felt when he heard the Song of a Nightingale is one and entire. And John said, you know, there has been much dispute as to what Keats meant in his famous lines. Beauty is truth, truth, beauty. That is all ye know on earth and all ye need to know. And Virginia said, oh, to enjoy the purer truth of fiction. So I said, undeniable beauty. And speaking of beauty, what about Coleridge? And Virginia said, one of those very rare writers who are able to enlighten us upon literature as an art. Then I said, John, Virginia, this is exhilarating, but I've had a terrifying thought. What if our children never get to read Dahl and Gleitzman and Rodder and Rowling and French and Gaiman and Tan and Di Camillo? What if our children never get to experience this marvellous work of art and then never experience the intimate social connections made through the deep bonds of book leather? What if they never encounter the communal enjoyment that accompanies the sharing of experiences of literature with others? These deep discussions, our responses to books we've so enjoyed, they're such a rich means to deep human connection. And Virginia said, I do believe more wine bottles are needed here.
So what happens when this private moment runs like quicksilver on a sloping board into a public technoculture? Moments of the past shoot through the moment I'm in and the moments I study. They shoot through the practicalities of growing a garden and into the aesthetics and poetics of what it means to garden, and then they shoot further along into relationships. They slide from the concrete into the abstract. And I begin to wonder, is owning nature ever compatible with loving it? The truth is, my presence in these physical and digital gardens feels harsh. Australian gardens and the digital stories that grow from them remain spaces where even all the promises of the digital world have failed to peel back the layers and complexities of Australia's violent colonial histories. Additionally, when the dirt of the garden soil becomes a plot in the digital world, those communicative practices, discussion, performing and posting, make us more dependent on the very networks that are integral to neoliberalism's financial and corporate dominance. Digital garden stories risked being washed in green and smothered in white noise. In the garden and on the screen, the present and the past collide, the physical entangles with the technical, and language mingles with an optimistic sense of something about to happen. Much of this is intangible. Yet I say I have optimistic faith that something that matters is unfolding in the common space and common ground in the digital commons. What is unfolding holds promise. It might provide the potential to unbind boundaries and borders of communication. I'm optimistic that writing about the common home garden ground will lead to more boundary unbinding. Wolf agrees, suggesting, could we not fly too with broad wings and with softness and be all one wing, all embracing, all gathering, and these boundaries, these pryings over hedge into hidden compartments of different colours, be all swept into one colour by the brush of the wing. She leans against a tower and whispers from outside this moment, whenever you see a board up with trespassers will be prosecuted, trespass at once. Following Wolf's suggestion might bring an end to having a foot in two worlds and instead standing without hedges between us on the common ground. It is then that we might better understand ways to communicate in, about and around private home garden lives.
Dear Virginia, Friday afternoon is about to return and turns me once more to the subject of the F word and your work. But I have decided that your work is cross my heart and hope to die upon vibrant Aurelian and rich vermilion flames, undoubtedly feminist. I'm not alone in reaching this conclusion. Jane Marcus in particular agrees with me and referred to you variously as a guerrilla fighter and writer in a Victorian skirt, whose enemy was the British patriarchy, capitalism and imperialism in all its forms, a raider on received history, redeemer of lost lives, rescuer and deliverer of stranded ghosts, and a woman warrior, to allude to the ways you sought to storm the citadel of male dominance and untie women's tongues. Your work is first and foremost feminist because of the focus on women and the overarching goal to complete abolishment of tyranny and all hierarchies of power and entitlement, and words and writing were the feminist weapons you felt best served the cause. While the Great Battle of World War II began to rage in the skies above you and apple blossoms snowed onto the grass in the front garden, on Wednesday, the 15th of May, 1940, the following idea took hold. The army is the body, I am the brain, thinking is my fighting. And your commitment to write for what is right continued, because for some time now you had been collecting enough powder to blow up St. Paul's and forge ahead, albeit hidden in plain sight with the explosive and transformational nature of your revolutionary enterprise. And speaking of blowing up things, rebellion and outspoken women decried as felons, I am reminded of your Rose Pargeter. How could we forget Fierce Rose? I see in her your position on the subject of the suffragettes and their strategies, as well as your deep-held fear of retribution for speaking out as a feminist. You appreciated the cause, but did not agree with the You preferred pacifist approaches which took up the fight intellectually, writing letters, writing essays, and writing novels which imagined a different kind of world for women, men, and everyone in between. Your approach to the war against patriarchy was an anti-war kind of feminism, not the Rose Pargeter kind, but a kind feminism, which viewed words as weapons of a softer yet even stronger kind. I think and wonder that perhaps there is a Rose Pargeter in all of us who write autoethnography, whether it be feminist or otherwise. Your EM.
These then were the two adventures of my professional life. The first, killing the good girl leader, I think I solved. She died. But the second, telling the truth about what it will take to transform our schools into places that will genuinely contribute to gender equality in society, I do not think I solved. I doubt that anyone has solved it yet. The obstacles against us are still immensely powerful, and yet they are very difficult to address. Outwardly, what is simpler than to fight for gender equality? Inwardly, I think the case is very different. We still have many ghosts to fight, many prejudices to overcome. Indeed, it will be a long time still, I think, before women can lead a girls' school without finding a phantom to be slain, a rock to be dashed against. If I, in this presentation, have laid stress upon the feminist leadership experiences of mine, it is because I believe that they are yours too, though in different forms, yours also. We have won rooms of our own, attained leadership positions within our professions, but this freedom is only beginning. The rooms are our own, but they're still bare. They have to be furnished, they have to be decorated, they have to be shared. How are you going to furnish your room? How are you going to decorate it? With whom are you going to share it, and upon what terms? These, I think, are questions of the utmost importance and interest. And you are able to decide for yourselves what the answers should be. Willingly, I would stay and discuss those questions and answers, but not today. My time is up and I must cease.
I said, John, Virginia, it really is time to reverse the ruin of readercide and rescue the love of books for new generations of readers. And Virginia said, then cry, teachers, open the books on your library shelves, read aloud with gusto, discuss a few passages in the books, and the desire grows upon students. And John said, well, Mel, the solution to the pandemic problem of readercide may well lie in reading enjoyment itself. Art has always been the means of keeping alive the sense of purpose that outruns evidence. The prophets of humanity have always been poets. I said, but I'm not a poet, John. And Virginia said, but you think poetically on the matter of children's reading enjoyment. You have grasp upon the emotion in it, an immense range of personal emotion, the intensity of which poetry draws upon. Then I said, but I'm a wretch. And Virginia said, then take the wretch to writing, dear. Then John said, bring the full force of the imaginative and emotional word to your work. Create a thesis that not only conveys the meaning and beauty in the enjoyed reading experience of children, it constitutes one for your reader. Only then can it be carried to full transformation. I said, I think I know what I need to do now, although I really would like to give Virginia the last word here. And Virginia said, I have sometimes dreamt, at least, that when the day of judgment draws and the great conquerors and lawyers and statesmen come to receive their rewards, their crowns, their laurels, their names carved indelibly upon imperishable marble, the Almighty will turn to Peter and will say, not without a certain envy when he sees us come, books under our arms, look, these need no reward. We have nothing to give them. They have loved reading.
My hand now hovers above the gate that leads me out of this garden moment. My thesis is complete, but like any gardener will tell you, my work here is never quite done. Virginia's warnings continue to interrupt my thinking gardening as these moments within moments run into each other like quicksilver on a sloping board. Before I leave, the gate squeaking on its hinges, something catches my eye. Virginia's moment and the moments I study meld and merge into one. A light is struck. Tendrils in an old-growth forest emerge but are caught by heavy machinery. A blow on the side of her head. The forest slopes, dusty, roots sticking out like a hairpin sticking out, about to fall. She moans in a chronic animal way. The investor sits himself down with a thump at the table and carves a hunk of bread and munches because there's nothing to be done. Vegetable steam curling from the pot. The fog of earth rising from the exposed soil. Let us do something then, something to end this horrible moment. These garden stories of the past and the present and the digital run together like quicksilver on a sloping board. Garden stories placed online aim to make us feel something. The growth of a garden is not separate from the growth of stories. They all grow from the same earth. There are promises embedded in the green worlds of the garden, conditions of possibility that buzz around. They rub up against each other, they mingle and collide. Communication is a revelation, but it is also about relationships happening in a moment. And now let us go and watch the owl flute off its watery bubble.
Dear Virginia, why, oh why did my video camera just stop working? But more importantly, why, oh why? Why did why capture our attention so when we set out to search for ways to write critical autoethnography? The little twisted sign shows how much our thinking and wondering has been tumbling from this to that in your writing, stumbling even, often quite by accident, and yet we sense it is no coincidence that we willfully caught the line of this small word as it floated by. Why reminds us of the promise we have made to free the bubbles of thinking and wondering trapped in our heads, to speak up, to speak back, and to speak as loudly as we can as critical autoethnographers, to throw fire on the flames and light up the world with words from within and without that are kind, wise, loving, and will bring about the change we are fighting for. I'm so privileged, Virginia. Today you have come to know this society of women I call sisters, our wolf pack, Karen, Mel, and Renee, and the way they are turning your words over to reclaim their mother's tongues and become bubble blowers of words of this one thing and another. Your words and writing have found their way into our hands and hearts, and we are now not just overflowing, but seething with the waves of revolution your writing has incited in our minds. I have decided it is time to let patriarchy know, to burst that particularly oppressive little bubble, and so I have penned him a letter. I think your dear Rose would quite like it, don't you? Your in sister, Elizabeth. Dear Patriarchy, I hope this letter finds you. You may think I'm about to say, finds you well, but there's the interruption. I hope this letter finds you because now the tables have turned. It is my turn to turn, and I am on the hunt for you. I have been your aspirations, your assertions, and your assumptions for many years now, and I have come to know you well. Your authoritative aroma reeks and seeps everywhere and anywhere alongside your arrogance, which has turned you into a middle-aged fool, pale and paunched in the pride, power, and privilege of your foul-smelling odour. You are not hard to find, and this letter will find you. For the newly born women I run with now, my wolf pack, we are daring, we are fast and fleet-footed, we are dangerous, and we are coming for you. So, patriarchy, who's the monster now?
Wow, wow, just wow. Yes, we are coming for you. Good words to finish on.
Thank you, everyone. I know that was a slightly longer presentation, but we hope you enjoyed the interweaving and braiding and performative play that we've engaged in.
Just amazing. I think there's a lot of love in the chat and in the emojis coming up on the screen. Look, I'll leave it up to you. Would you like to have a little bit of feedback now, a dialogue about it now? We have time, and go to our last paper after that, or shall we have the discussion all together? People are saying a lot of things in the chats, but maybe, yeah.
Wolfies, what do you want to do? I don't mind.
Can we have some verbal feedback? It looks like people have lots to say. Wolfpack for the win. Yeah. Wolfpack for PM. Let's have some dialogue as well as the beautiful testimonies in the chat. We've probably got about 10 minutes, really.
Just a bit of a, just maybe to get the conversation going, we actually prepared this piece for the National Virginia Wolf Society Conference, and we got all sorted with our Wolfpack t-shirts, and
wow,
had no idea what that conference was going to be like, but so excited. This was, you know, the world stage where everyone was talking Virginia, and but I'm pretty sure we were the only presentation in the 5-day conference to do this performative work.
Wow.
But people, yeah, were really taken by it, and enjoyed the performative sentiments of Virginia Woolf that we tried to invoke in our work. We were trying to be, her work, the breadth of it really is very performative, and yeah, so we were trying to evoke that, and we thought we can't really speak about Virginia Woolf theoretically without doing it performatively, because that's how she wrote. And so Karen, Mel and Renee and myself had all been working with Virginia Woolf in different ways and different pieces of hers, and thought, well, here's a way to share how we're using Woolf to do the work that we love and do it differently and radically. That's a bit of a precursor to the piece.
Thanks for that, Liz. I mean, it's, you know, each of the pieces is so smart and fun and effective as performances and as scholarship and all of it, you know, literarily, linguistically, all of it, but so skillfully woven together. It just, it was a brilliant strategy to weave it together. It was really, really great.
Thank you. I hope you can feel how much fun we had.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Any other comments? There were certain phrases, certain sentences that really resonated that people would repeat in the chat. I know certain ones landed more than others.
Yes, Diderot and Andy Griffiths in the one sentence has to be award winning, I have to say.
Yeah,
it was really a fine moment. And I just want to say how much I loved the act of homage that this enacted. You know, it was just so overflowing with love for Woolf and the Woolfian, and I really appreciated that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
I mean, I guess that's one of the, I know that there's one part of the conversation with Woolf that's probably missing, and that is some of her relationship to coloniality is missing, and class, but that's time for another performance.
Yeah. All right. If there aren't any others burning interventions right now, why don't we sit with that, let it wash over us, and we'll welcome the next paper and thank the Wolfpack. Thank the Wolfpack once again for that amazing presentation. And we'll move on to the second ensemble for this panel, and we can come back and talk about them in relation to one another, perhaps at the end if we want to. But I'll invite Ruth Fogarty, Emily Collyer, Dietem Caia, and Claire Carlin for this paper, and thank them for coming along to the conference, seeing you at so many of the panels, and for presenting. And your title is Autoethnographic Conversation Makes Bubbles. Over to you.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I think Ruth's going to share her screen, so we'll just wait a minute to see if that happens, and, you know, technical joys. Oh, yes.
Can you see that?
Yes.
This is not a PowerPoint. Let me front load it by saying this is not a PowerPoint.
All right. So yeah, this is quite. We're going to chat to this document, and we're going to just take it in turns. So I'll start. You're going to scroll down to page 3, I think we're starting on. All right. Thoughts on our presentation. So we are 4 PhD candidates, Ruth, Didham, Claire and myself, who met at RMIT in March 2020. Each of us commencing a creative practice PhD, obviously, as COVID unfolded. Since then, we have developed a collaborative writing project and a peer mentorship model. So last Saturday, we met to try and formalise our presentation, and we'd all written these nice, neat things, and we read it aloud to each other, and it just felt so flat and untruthful. And it was interesting to us, this replicated our past experience in coming together to write a collaborative paper where the conversations, the meetings, the chats were so rich and vibrant, but the locking it down into a particular written form eluded us. So we decided today to share the messier, more interrupted, drafty process of the notes we contributed to a shared document as we tried to figure out what to share today. I think, did we get to saying that the most straightforward way might be for each of us to take one aspect of our bubble and speak to it? For a 15-minute panel, that would literally be 3.75 minutes each. So it's almost nothing, as light as air. I'd be happy to talk about the beginnings, the idea to collaborate on something. I'd also be happy to talk about the ways in which the group has bolstered other parts of practice, sending emails, asking for advice from you all about how to phrase something or how to pitch something, etc. Other things we might like to cover.
Wait, I agree we should start the conversation with you, Em, as the initiator, describing what you hope for, and then we can move around the group. Perhaps we could describe the way our personalities responded to Em's pitch, the creative, the phenomenological, the practical response, and then circle back to Em to complete our hermeneutic circle.
Okay, so conversation as practice, what actually happens in the space when we talk, how we are making research practice happen. The process of this essay, no, not this essay, the other essay, the pitching, the eventual letting go when it didn't fit the mold, how the doc is now almost like a totem for our unique conversational model, plans to perform / present it or a version of it sometime, show some on the screen, the comments, etc. How the process of our conversations and then trying to capture / reflect on it mirrors the process we are all doing as we become researchers / find out feet, meant to be our feet in the academy / start to make our PhDs. Something about COVID / distance / teams / bonding remotely / ways to adapt. Slowly eat an aero bar or blow a hubba bubba bubble. Badly.
Ruth, you're on mute.
I keep turning myself on and off all day, I'm so sorry. What's emerged from these conversations is a safe way to explore and connect terrifying academic theory with actual life, which got me thinking a little more about trying on the hermeneutic approach for this thing of ours. As the Fab Four, we are flirting with theory as a way to talk about it, to use it, make it real and bring it into practice. The group, this group, is a way to safely explore together the unfamiliar realm of academia. The document is the expression of this play and practice. The conversation is a means of engaging with ideas and each other. The engagement raises questions, creates new problems, opens fresh pathways of thinking, attending this ethnography conference as a panel and hopefully future similar events presents us with an opportunity to reflect upon our brand new peer learning mentorship method, which in turn might bring us as individuals, practitioners and peers a little closer to interpreting, performing, living the academic experience. The Fab Four and its material output creates the conditions for insight, thus the hermeneutic loop. The purpose of autoethnography is not only to tell personal stories. It intends to expand the understanding of social realities through the lens of the researcher's personal experiences. Hee-Won Chang, Individual and Collaborative Autoethnography as Method. To understand how the Fab Four practice is also an autoethnographic one, I come back to this quote from Chang, which reinforces the message that our thing, understood through the lens of our newly emerging academic identities in this time of COVID through these digital technologies and platforms that encourage connection and collaboration, is a learning journey that is both particular to us and highly contextualized by the times and conditions which inform it. It gets its vitals from our personal experiences, but it is entirely born of the social forces we are living through. And it has been, and please continues to be, the talking, breathing, thinking out loud space I needed that I didn't know I needed. Or anyway, that's what came up for me this Sunday afternoon, sitting on a deck chair in my yard, drinking a warming white and watching the mozzies closing in. One more thing. I stumbled upon a journal called Entanglements, Experiments in Multimodal Ethnography. I recommend taking a look at this article on the ethnographic collaboration using digital tools, digitally performing duo ethnography, collaborative practices in the production of anthropological knowledge. It contains some great insights for newbies, as well as illustrating a rich text presentation format. It made me think our own essay would be enriched by embedding examples of our multimodal performances or outputs. Reminder to capture screen grabs from our virtual performances.
Doing it now.
Oh, Ruth. I love this idea of embedding and layers, that this collaboration is multimodal and so far open-ended. Claire. Oh, Claire. Notes and a bit of writing. I'm imagining a laminated document where layers are constantly added, not a clean slate or a palimpsest, as we're adding, not scrubbing to use again. No erasure, a building up. And an original document, our original document, as source text, and all we do next, expand to next, lay it on this and next to different paradigms, different models. So it expands vertically and horizontally, as it were. Maybe a performative aspect. What do we think about this? Collaboratively authored dialogue and post hoc synthesis. The Collyer and Dean hypothesis article. Is it synthesized or is it collage? Emma, I was thinking of you on this. Some aspects have been mixed together, but I feel we are more layered and sitting next to each other's ideas rather than forming them into a Fab Four melange. Then there's the disruption of COVID and disruptive nature of this methodology / method. Multivocal as feminist practice, polyphonic, would argue not to move away from experts, but rather see everyone as having an area of expertise or several. Not no experts, populist, but search for one's expertise, layers of expertise, ability, skill, knowledge. We felt our lack of expertise as scholars, more or less per person, but expertise as practitioners, tension in inquiry. Text box for introverts, slow talkers and thinkers, extra information, temporal extension. It's the way in the plague times. I like this. Like improvisation among a group of musicians, our ensemble created and subsequently curated moments of both harmony and dissonance. And this, creating a static but unstable record. Control and letting go of control. Let's discuss. The facilitator of a research seminar we all participate in at RMIT described creative practice PhD researchers as each being in a boat rowing across a lake, the lake of literature, theory, ideas and work, and each of us in our craft rowing across, making our own track on the water, our PhD thesis. Possible answers to where to expand to next. A non-fiction lab presentation and discussion, and perhaps open text afterwards for ongoing discussion. Publish our essay and alongside it another to be laminated essay where we pick key themes and open it to discussion. This could be open for a set time and then we could close it and organise a discussion around it.
Yes, Claire, this resonates with me so much. Discovery through improvisation is so potent for creative practice researchers and practice-led researchers like myself. When you mentioned the harmony of voices and the polyphony, that really got me thinking of like a polyphonic autoethnography and what that would be like. And, you know, is that something that we're doing? And the metaphor of the musicians is also noteworthy and really stuck with me, especially this idea of riffing as a term, which I think we sort of adopted in our meetings because we wouldn't always have a specific agenda, but we would always have a general idea of the notes, the beats and the bass line that would carry us through our meeting. And that was always so joyful. And so I've been thinking that, you know, working as a theatre maker has meant that much of my practice has always been quite live and active. And I think I felt challenged by how to bring that need for liveness and active conversation to the academy. So I've sort of always needed community when learning, and having this, you know, regular peer mentorship model that evolved alongside the PhD research provided this other space to discuss not only the research and the theory, but for me, like the praxis as well. And it provided a way to discuss obstacles, fears, anxieties, as well as discoveries. So the peer-to-peer learning functions differently to the supervisory relationships, because I think what we found is this sort of soft, reflexive approach within the regular meetings. And so that would mean that there was more room for play, for slowing down between ideas. And I've been thinking a lot about time. And so, you know, in our meetings, this idea of stretching time outward, it did something very different to my body that I wasn't really feeling in these plague times, which feel quite sort of rushed and tense. And time is a very difficult force in the academy and in life, you know, not feeling like we have enough time. So like we can, for example, rush through meetings, we rush through thoughts, and sometimes even writing a paper can condense the time between ideas that needs to breathe. So autoethnography as a methodology provides this sense of accessing the moments and the details between the bigger thoughts. And I think we were really able to access this in our conversations with one another, and conversation kind of became our material. And I also think that the improvisatory and sense-based or quote unquote felt approach that we developed in our model was supported by the nature of the generosity of the group members as well. And then this took on its own heartbeat and rhythm, and especially through the pandemic, where much of my theatre making work, for example, had become so sedentary, and the kind of bottom half of my body felt, you know, divorced or removed from the top half. You know, and so much of my work was unstaged. The Fab Four brought this liveness to conversation that evolved into an assemblage of creative storytelling, shared experiences, and this beautiful place to discuss a mixture of cultural and personal observations as we move through our research.
Softness. I just want to pick up on that word you said before, Didem, softness. So important. Seeing each other's faces on the screens, glitches and our weird feedback noises and internet lagging and listening. Our paper, by the way, hasn't been published yet. It hasn't fitted the forms that are currently available for academic papers, that we've found anyway. This not fitting has become core to our autoethnographic process as we let go of some of the goal-oriented elements of the group and embrace it as an ongoing, living, breathing autoethnography. We still have aims to share our research, our mentorship model with others in public ways like this, but we want these sharings to be open and adaptable and uncertain. So here we are in this small bubble, connecting with other bubbles, making more bubbles.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I love that. That was, and how perfect were these two groups to be together in the same panel. I just can't get over it. Absolutely loved it. I'm going to turn it over to the group. I have some things I'd like to ask, but I'm going to turn it over to the group first. That was just fantastic. Thank you so much. Comments, questions, bubble blowing.
So much to take in, but very, very inspiring, both panels. Really, really. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. Fab Four, yes. I really love about the two of them together how they, well, there was that obvious formal parallel, right, of the intercutting with 4 group members. But I love how they both, but in different ways, sort of deconstruct academic work or knowledge creation, and the relationship between, you know, the relationship between language and like making, creative making, and materiality and theory were present for me in both of them. And I guess I wonder, I love also the idea of seeing behind the scenes, the kind of, you know, pulling back the curtain on the Wizard of Oz, while, you know, this ridiculous and I think unnecessary now sort of mystery and I don't know, invisibility of academic process, and blowing up the individuality, the ensconced individuality of that labor, to sort of talk about other modes, which, you know, autoethnography, it's part of the project, of course, of critical autoethnography in particular, but, you know, there was a time in which it was just seen as completely radical and unacceptable form at all, not so long ago, 20 years ago. So, and less, 10 years ago. So I guess I wanted to ask both groups how you came at your collective form for today. And I know that both of them are in different kinds of processes. So maybe there's not one starting point. I'm not really trying to reduce it to one starting point, but there were so many similarities and so many differences. I'm wondering how you set on your ultimate form. You know, the Google Doc we're going to show you and play with audience attention that way versus the performance of these intercut letters, essentially.
I'm going to say right off the bat, it's because we have no shiny performance, because we're so new and we are loath to build layers. I think I can speak for the girls when I say that idea that we would have an artificial or a shiny or a layered presentation yet, when we're still finding our feet. This is we all joined last year and we were all adults doing other things, and then suddenly we're in this space, and it's a disambiguating, finding our feet with each other. Felt like we needed to be authentic about doing that in every sort of version of the expression now, and maybe in a few years' time it would look a bit slick and sexier, but now it's a piecemeal process, and we felt this was an environment that invited that kind of disambiguation.
Yeah.
The other Google Doc that we were working on is about 30 or 40 pages long. Insane chaos. So this was us tidying it up a little bit.
Thanks, Ruth.
Yeah, and just to pick up on that quickly, I think, as we all know, like one of the biggest purposes of autoethnography is to try and capture the liveness of process within the theoretical expression as well. And so for us, like Emily said, when we sat down to try and curate it in a way that we've sort of, as scholars, been subliminally conditioned to do, it took away from this amazing 6-month process that we'd experienced. And actually, Em's original proposition was, hey guys, we're all sort of doing similar things. We have similar values. Why not come together and write an essay or write an article? But then actually from that starting point, we took all these detours, and it was the process that actually became the really important thing, not necessarily the goal of the essay, but the journey toward that. So I guess trying to capture that in this, was one of our goals.
I love it, not just as a liminal or an interstitial stopping off point on the way to something shinier. Like, I actually really love the multiple kinds of work it does. And also just, it really highlights, like both forms really highlighted this collective nature of the work, not through necessity, but through choice. And I wonder how much that has to do with the alienation we've been experiencing over the last 18 or 20 months. They're just so alive, both pieces. Does anyone from the other group want to say how you got to that particular structure?
Yeah, we were in a room together. So there was a call out who's interested in writing about Wolf. And we hadn't seen each other for a while. So there was just the excitement of being physically in a space together. And then we all talked about what Wolf pieces we were working with. And so we just tried a similar method. So we all just started playing with palimpsest together in the space. And then as we read what we were doing, Mel has a particularly delicious performative style that, just started to shape the way then I heard what I was writing in my own head. So when we started to read to each other, then that starts to, I guess, bring some continuity around the way that we were going to perform. That was my experience anyway. What do you think, fellow Wolfpack?
I think that great big whiteboard, the glass board with lots and lots of markers, and the freedom we had in that room, and we had time, which my friends there just focused on. We're so short of time. We made time that day, and we're rubbing out and trying to work out who goes first. Do we do it this way? Do we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1? How are we doing this? So I think the room and the board and the markers were big in that, and the time.
Awesome. Other questions, comments? Emily's writing in the chat. We've only met in person once, I think, since March 2020, when Ruth visited Melbourne briefly late last year. Wow. Online dating. Yep, Stacey.
I just wanted to pick up on something you just said, Dan, in regards to the PH for Fab 4, because you put something I was trying to put words to so well, which is this isn't a stepping stone towards something shinier. And I completely agree. And what I'd like to see next is that, we all just receive a link to a Google Doc and we all show up, and then we watch all this happen in real time.
Totally.
My dream is that you go messier, not shinier. That there's more screen eating and day drinking and interruption, and that thing you can do with the Google Doc where you change the edit so it all crosses out if you delete something. And that's that I'm putting in a request, CAE 2022.
I love it.
We talked about that, Stacey. It's coming. We did talk about that. An open chaos platform that everybody gets to do. And we actually talked about, can we lose control? Are we all right with losing control on that? And we decided it was necessary. So it's coming, Stacey.
I want to know if that's actually possible to kind of, I'm sure it must be, I'm just, it's my limitation. Because I was trying to do that with an article I wrote with someone earlier this year. And we also had these really rich, like, comments all down the thing and the crossing out and the disarray and the relationship between the comments and the text body was super interesting. And then I couldn't figure out how to make it stay that way, because obviously if you download it even as a Word doc, it changes. But I love the visuality in the Google Doc of that very thing.
I mean, that was some of the, that was when we were pitching the article, was to Cinder, and they were really keen, but we just couldn't work out a way for the comments to show that was meaningful for a reader, but also kept the spirit. And it just showed, I guess, the limitations of what's possible in a kind of static written format. And we weren't technically savvy enough yet to kind of know how to make it into something that could be a live experience for the reader in the way that it was for us. So, I mean, that's an interesting challenge to sort of mull over, is like how there must be platforms around that can do it, but we weren't aware of them yet. So yeah, and I imagine I feel too in this last 2 years that's probably become more and more common as we're all working remotely. So this thing of the thing that we're sharing, but that's an electronic thing is very common experience now.
Yeah. So hypertext is the next one. I don't know about hypertext, but Emily, if you guys could keep me in that loop, that'd be amazing, because actually in that paper we experimented with it in every way, like and every other form lost the dynamism of the back and forth of the comments, and we experimented a lot, and in the end just didn't include the comments because it didn't read the same once you sort of like intercut them in a Word document, or I don't know, it lost all of the vitality. So I'd be really keen to know more about that, and also to write about the performativity of those, text as performance, what's possible in that and how it's so easily lost. Anyway, obviously I'm obsessing now. Other questions and comments. I think there has been a request, Emily, for you to stand up and show your dress. I think we're getting off track, but we also have to see it. So
that's not off track. It's research. It's bubble research.
Pretty fabulous. Amazing.
Yes.
Woo! All right.
Bring it on.
The heart's going up.
Can I just pick up on something Beata said in the question? Slightly off this topic, it's on topic, but off the most recent topic, about it sounds so comforting to exchange ideas and comment on each other's, which is obviously something both groups have in common. And I just wanted to say, quite soberly, without this collaboration, I don't think I would have got to my confirmation of candidature, and that's been hugely important. And just the courage and the candidness of the group through their sharing their ideas on theory, and then the actual practice of doing this, and then the various multimodal outcomes have just been exactly that. So it is comforting, and I think that that's terribly important in this bubble moment that we don't know how long it's going on for.
Thanks for that. Yeah, powerful, absolutely powerful. And adaptive. We find community, don't we?
Absolutely, yeah.
Usually times. We've only got a couple of minutes left, because I would like to maybe throw to Stacey to ask you to, I'm getting a terrible echo all of a sudden. Anyway, to ask you to talk about the weird links for tonight so that no one misses out.
Yeah.
Oh, we've just put it in the chat. I see.
Thank you. I was poised. Good handle. So For those of you who can be with us tonight, and I'll just preface this by saying that this is mostly, I'm just going to talk about Melbourne time. Oh gosh, that's terrible, Dan. Katrina Douglas and Dave Carlos's keynote will be premiered on YouTube so that we don't experience the Zoom lag because it's a film. So what we're asking you to do at 7 p.m. Melbourne time, or whatever time you're in that articulates to that, is to pop into the YouTube channel, click, and there's a link there. And we'll watch that video. I think it's about 45 minutes. And then we'll pop back into our Zoom #1 for Q&A with David and Katrina. And then after that, they've made just a very short video that's got some music and some images. And we'll pop back over there, and that's gonna play at 8:15 Melbourne time. So I've got that link as well. So we'll move back out of the Zoom and over there, and that'll be our kind of closing moment. But it's a little bit of a treat they've put together for us. So I just wanted everybody to know that's how we're gonna work tonight. Yeah, okay.
Okay, well, I think that's about time. Just thanks so much to both panels. It was a really incredible session and just perfect together. So yeah, big love, lots of thanks. Make sure you read
Thank you, Fab, for it was fabulous.
Yes, thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you soon. We'll see you at 4.
Bye, guys.